Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Thursday, December the 23rd, 2021. Let's talk about Kamala Harris. Has there ever been a White House, president, vice president that has been inherently comic before the duo of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris? Well, a couple of weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, there were all these stories. Kamala Harris is a bust. No one likes her, etc., etc. And this seemed to be an organized kind of putsch from the Democratic Party because, if Joe Biden, one day, attends a press conference in blackface or imagines that the podium is a urinal and whips it out, then they're going to have to invoke the 25th Amendment, and then Kamala would become president, and the Democrats, oh my God, we will be destroyed if this happens. We will be destroyed like the Conservative Party in Canada in 1993 under Kim Campbell, reduced from 169 seats to 2. But now there is the pushback. This is a story by Brandon Gillespie at Fox News. Vice President Kamala Harris is reportedly expressing discontent with the news coverage surrounding her performance as the nation's second highest office holder, citing her race and gender. Oh, her race. Oh, she's the first Black president. Well, Black, kind of, sort of Black. She is a Tamil Brahmin, though, and that's the most important thing about her arrogance. Oh, and gender, meaning sex. In other words, I'm just a widow girl. Why are you all picking on me? According to a piece by the New York Times, Harris has been privately complaining to her allies that the media's coverage of her would be better if she were any of her 48 white male predecessors, white males. Boo! And has reportedly confided in them about the difficulties she's facing with her assigned portfolio from the White House. What portfolio would that be? Oh, I'm putting you in charge of the border debacle. Isn't that really the president's job? And no, I'm not going to go to the border with Mexico because it's boring or something like that. Yeah, her portfolio. The Times piece, which focused on Harris's struggle to define herself within the Biden White House. This is a woman who actually, during the election campaign, said that her running shoes, her Chuck Taylors or whatever they're called, defined her. Only a teenager talks like that, but never mind. The Times piece noted that she held no headlining role when it came to some of the administration's most difficult decisions, and that she was caught between criticism that she wasn't performing her job well and resentment from supporters that she was being undercut by the West Wing. Yes, the role of the vice president. The role of the vice president traditionally is to attend funerals of lower level foreign leaders. The president, has got better things to do than go to the funeral of the, president of Ghana or whatever. And she's complaining about this. Everyone knows that the being vice president is a thankless job. John Nance Garner famously said that he was a two-term vice president under FDR, famously said that being vice president was worth a warm pitcher of piss. Yeah, that's what he said. John Nance Garner, he was a fine man, by the way. The Times noted Harris's historically low approval rating and that a number of high-profile staff members opted to depart their jobs less than a year into Harris's term. It also reported she was reaching out to prominent figures like Hillary Clinton to help determine her future direction. Yes, Hillary Clinton, the woman who decided to read her acceptance speech for the 2016 election that she lost, and then all her supporters went onto social media. Why are you laughing at her? I guess women just don't get the joke, do they? Ms. Harris has privately told her allies that the news coverage of her would be different if she were any of the 48 predecessors, all of whom were white and male. She has also confided in them about the difficulties she is facing with intractable issues in her portfolio, such as voting rights and the root causes of migration. Oh, you mean the root cause being I'm living in a terrible country and I want to move to the United States, which is much less terrible. Also, I get free stuff just for being here. That's the root cause of migration. The Times reported that the White House was pushing back on criticism of Harris and quoted Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, who claimed Harris's assigned tasks were incredibly demanding and suggested she wasn't actually taking credit for her accomplishments as Vice President of the United States. Some have suggested, I should insert a historical footnote here. John Adams, when he was Vice President of the United States, got a little too big for his boots. And the fact that the Vice President of the United States is President of the Senate led him to throw his weight around in the Senate, which led the Senate of the United States to essentially tell John Adams, just like, take off, okay? Or we're going to beat you. And so he did. Some have suggested that Barris and Buttigieg are rivals gearing up for a face-off in the 2024 presidential election, should Biden decide not to run. Biden, who turned 79 last month and is the oldest president in history, told ABC News Wednesday that he would seek re-election if he was healthy. The Times also expanded on the counsel Clinton gave Harris about being in her position as a woman in politics. There is a double standard. It's sadly alive and well, Clinton said. A lot of what is being used to judge her, just like it was to judge me or the women who ran in 2020 or everyone else, is really colored by that. Yes, this is the same Hillary Clinton after the shocking debacle in the Obama administration when she was Secretary of State at Benghazi. Who cares who's responsible? What does it matter? She said. This is your country's diplomats have been murdered in a foreign country, and your attitude is, yeah, shit happens, right? The Times added that the two speak over the phone every few months, and Clinton has visited Harris in her office. They speak over the phone every few months, and Clinton has visited Harris in her office. So they're really tight. Representative Karen Bass, Democrat of California, also defended Harris to the Times, claiming there was a double standard that went further than Harris's gender. You can see what the message here is that women are the weaker sex. We've been hearing for decades that women were just as strong as men were, but no, whenever women are criticized, oh, why are you picking on me? I'm just a widow girl. Politics is a nasty business, but apparently women don't know that. Karen Bass said, I know, and we all knew that she would have a difficult time because anytime you're a first, you do. Okay. America had a black president, which is about, a million times more powerful than vice president for 2 terms. But no, the great difficulty in being the first kind of sort of black vice president. And Don Serber has a amusing column at his blog spot. She's right. They don't treat Kamala like a male VP. The New York Times chivalrously defended Kamala today with a lengthy story on her vice presidency. The spin is Biden used her to get elected and now wishes to discard her. Duh. Used her to get elected. What exactly did Kamala Harris bring to the table as a vice presidential candidate? Well, she's kind of sort of black, but Biden already had the black vote wrapped up. She's from California, which is a one-party state. Willie Brown, who was Kamala Harris's, shall we say, mentor, beseeched her not to run for president. Her presidential campaign was so disastrous that she dropped out before 2020. Now, Willie Brown can be accused of many things, but being stupid is not one of them. Serber continues, paragraph 13 caught my eye. Ms. Harris has privately told her allies, that the news coverage of her would be different if she were any of her 48 predecessors, all of whom were white and male. True, Serber says. Spiro Agnew never made the cover of Vogue. The story glossed over her incompetence, which caused a rift that cost passage of Build Back Better this year. A week into her presidency, vice presidency, Kamala gave an exclusive interview with WSAZ in West Virginia behind Joe Manchin's back. She also did an interview with a Phoenix station in Kristen Sinema's state, and she sought to pressure them into supporting the first mega trillion-dollar spend-a-thon by Biden. You see, these people don't know how to do politics anymore. If you're going to go to West Virginia or if you're going to go to Arizona, you want to fix this up first with the resident power brokers there. Otherwise, it can backfire on you. But I guess that's the sort of thing, the woman is not, supposed to know. That was the American Rescue Plan. It was followed by the bipartisan one. Now we have BBB as Democrats loot the federal government the way the mobsters looted the Bamboo Lounge in the movie Goodfellas. I would not put it past Democrats to burn the place down once they are done. Those are the only two local interviews she gave. Manchin said, I saw the interview. I couldn't believe it. No one called me about it. We're going to try to find a bipartisan way forward, but we need to work together. That's not a way of working together. Kamala bombed. She said the bill would help clean up West Virginia's abandoned landmines. Most observers believe she meant abandoned mines land. I want to know who told her about our landmines. That was supposed to be our little secret to keep the revenuers out. The media got all over Quayle for misspelling potato. I have to break in here because BuzzFeed is pushing a story about the kid who embarrassed Dan Quayle. Okay, so Quayle was at a school. I don't know why he was at a school. I don't know why politicians go to schools because they can't vote there. Anyway, some sort of spelling bee ensued where the word potato came up, and Quayle, who I'm quite sure knew how to spell potato, but a teacher's flashcard held up to him had potato with an E, and Quayle thought, well, this is an expert. This is a teacher. So if a teacher tells me that potato is spelled with an E, I suppose it must be spelled with an E. Serber continues, of course, what protects Kamala is not sexism. The media got all over Palin for saying the vice president is president of the Senate, which she is. The New York Times was polite about pissing off Manchin, writing, quote, in Ms. Harris's case, she came to the job without strong ties to key senators. In other words, she has no friends. One person briefed on the Oval Office meeting said it would be more productive if the discussion between Biden and Manchin remained private. It is unclear that the president had much sway on his own either, given the senator's decision this week to break with the White House over the domestic policy bill. Manchin and Sinema never worked with Biden when he was a senator. Biden was never their colleague. Kamala's attempt to turn up the heat on them created a trust issue with the president. No one is dumb enough to believe Kamala did this on her own. She is not ready to be president. The press tries to cover that up, but it is painfully obvious now. Instead, excuses are made. The New York Times said, but the complexity of the issues she has been assigned and the long-term solutions they require should have prompted the West Wing to defend Harris more aggressively to the public, according to Representative Karen Bass. Yes. Serber says, if you cannot handle the vice presidency, we cannot expect you to handle the presidency. Biden put her in charge of the border. She is uninterested in it. The story said, Representative Henry Cuellar, a moderate from Texas and one of the more prominent voices on border issues in the Democratic Party, said his experiences with Harris's team had been disappointing. I like the way they soft sell that. When a politician says that, well, my experiences with this person have been disappointing, what he is actually saying is, I hate her guts. Cuellar said, I say this very respectfully to her. I moved on. She was tasked with that job. It doesn't look like she's very interested in this, so we are going to have to move on to other folks that work on the issue. He no longer deals with her, calling the president's staff instead. He said, at least they talk to you. But Hillary was there to defend her. She said, there is a double standard. It's sadly alive and well. A lot of what is being used to judge her, just like it was to judge me. Yeah, let's make it personal, Hillary, because that's what you're all about. Or the women who ran in 2020, or everyone else is really colored by that. And so long as we have women and young people moaning, I simply can't resist this story from Harriet Alexander at the Daily Mail. Joe Biden's junior staff are reportedly burnt out and demoralized, with the team lacking any camaraderie and isolated from their colleagues. Yes, junior staff, burnt out and demoralized. That is in your job description. The former mayor of Chicago, Emmanuel Rahm, supposedly, this was written up in Newsweek in the 90s, that he was so humiliated working for the Clinton campaign, just routinely humiliated, in front of other people for nothing, essentially, that he decided, I'm going to rise to the top. He became chief of staff, and then I'll be able to dole out the humiliation by myself. If you've ever seen Armando Iannucci's show, The Thick of It, you think, yeah, maybe this is exaggerated. Maybe politicians aren't this venal. Yes, they are that venal. White House employees told Politico that morale is low, echoing months of complaints made by staff working for VP Kamala Harris. Harris has had 4 senior members of her team resign in recent weeks. Biden's staff told the site Wednesday that they too were unhappy, blaming the lack of team spirit and poor management in the midst of the pandemic. Poor management, you say? Well, I guess if if the president of the United States is a senile buffoon, there's going to be poor management. They were particularly hurt by being excluded, they said, from holiday traditions like the pardon of the Thanksgiving turkey and tours of the White House Christmas decorations. The pardoning of the Thanksgiving turkey. I've never understood this, because killing turkeys and eating them is essential to Thanksgiving. But no, the president of the United States is going to be the better man and pardon one particular turkey. It's also hypocritical and ironic that a president whose brand is built on empathy, no, it isn't, and family has staff policies that fly in the face of that brand, one staff member told the outlet. It's not a good look, and it's emblematic of how this place runs. So in more female politician news, this is from Amanda Preston-Giacomo at the Daily Wire. AOC, that would be Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, posts a photo of her glaring at Joe Manchin, because that's news, right? AOC on Tuesday posted a photo of her glaring at Senator Joe Manchin during a past State of the Union address, commenting that she doesn't have an obligation to smile at people doing hurtful things, apparently referring to Manchin. Yes, Representative Karen. Everyone is saying to me, why don't you smile more? How dare you? How dare you? Here's the funny thing, that smiling tends to ingratiate yourself with other people. And there's a famous example in boxing history of the fellow who fought Muhammad Ali, George Foreman. That guy always looked like he was going to tear your head off. And so he was, a heel. And then he learned to smile, and suddenly everyone in America loved George Foreman. An Instagram user sent a message to AOC, reading your glare at Manchin was everything. I tried to warn y'all, Ocasio-Cortez responded in text overlapping the infamous photo. Y'all? Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez is not black and she's not Southern. She's from New York City. But since she is a woman of color, here she appropriates y'all. So here's your reminder that your smile is a gift and you are not obligated to give it to anybody or anything just to keep up appearances or make people feel comfortable when they are doing hurtful things. Here's a tip for the men listening. If any woman says anything like that to you, run as fast as you can. Let's take a look in on the chat. Hello to Red Sulfur, Anrun, Emmett Kelly's Earth, Dan, Crazy Frog, Football Analysis, Dawn from Beyond, David Wright. Oh, William Hicks, Head McNeck. Merry Christmas Eve, says Dawn from Beyond. Anrun says Bush and Quayle were unintentionally amusing at times. I wrote a parody back on my old blog years ago when Sarah Palin was nominated for Vice President of the United States. And it was Dan. I made up this comedy bit about Dan Quayle bitching. I'll give you a little bit from it that I remember that, they said I was unqualified. Well, I'm Daniel effing Webster compared to this woman. And McCully's Earth says she can always preside over the Senate. Yes. Chogokin 666 says, when public servants want only the perks and none of the responsibilities, is it indicative of what? Who else? Quachalango, hello. And yes, Anrun says Kim Taser Potter was convicted on both counts of manslaughter. I'll have more on that later. Chogokin 666 tonight on Mannix, the Cornholio portfolio. Mannix plays at 2 a.m. in the morning where I live on MeTV, which, as you know, is the old man's TV station. And I'll just sometimes wake up and Mannix will be on, and he's always being beaten. He's being threatened with a gun, kidnapped, pistol whipped, or beaten. And I thought, this is a really lousy job. I mean, and he's one of these people, of course, oh, no, since I love your story, you don't need to pay me. Well, I'm figuring a guy who gets a gun pulled on him regularly and pistol whipped and beaten and kidnapped, that you'd want the big bucks to do that job, right? Moral Outrage Prophet says, powerful queen, yes. William Hicks says, is Butt Judge back from his family leave yet? I'm still waiting for some exotic appliances to be delivered. Crazy Frog says, I just want to see Kamala waving her finger at Putin and Z. That's when things get spicy. Red Sulfur says, saw video today of Dr. Stanley Plotkin, vax guru, admitting he experimented on orphans, retarded children, and children of female prisoners. Well, it's science, so how can you object? Red Sulfur continues, Modern Mengele. He also admitted to using colonial subjects from the Congo in human experiments. Ugh. David the Gnome says, Harris was a groupie for Montel Williams that one time in the 90s, which is pretty impressive. It's on the rumor mills about Montel Williams. He was a black former talk show host. That he was into threesomes. That he was exclusively into threesomes. And when we add to that the rumor, which is attested to by many people, that Kamala Harris's mentor took her to swinging parties. Hello to Professor Paul Kakwa. William Hicks says, Hillary said colored. It's cancellation time. Oh, yes. Super predators. Remember that? David the Gnome says, Ram is one of those rare stories where a Jewish kid becomes a powerful, corrupt politician. And what do we have here about Turkey? Pardoning only goes back to H.W. Bush, said Emmett Kelly's Earth. Well, thank you for that. I just kind of assumed that this tradition had gone on forever. I'm glad to know this because the tradition doesn't make any sense. Oh, William Hicks says, interesting how Biden can go on and on about mothers needing help to pay for their expensive insulin for their kids, but ignore how much easier it is when she hasn't lost her job for refusing the jab. Visionary Companion, hello, says Dante Wright, holy martyr. I'll have more on that later. Red Sulfur points out that Plotkin's videos are up on BitChute. Hello to Sam B. Popcasso88 says, I don't like turkey. Of course, many people, this is a cliche, many people have pointed this out, that Americans love turkey on Thanksgiving and Christmas. But why is it they don't seem to consume much turkey during the rest of the year? Because it's, it's tough meat, and it takes some skill, to make it, edible, actually. Best Mannix was Burt Lancaster in Lawman, says Quachulango. Popcasso88 says, KMG, who was worse, Tony Blair or Thatcher? Well, I'd have to say Tony Blair. There's a lot to say about Thatcher, which is good. I mean, her toughness. She was a female politician, but she didn't play the I'm just a widow girl card. No, she was a tough woman. When she first ran for politics, there was very serious prejudice against women in politics. Her handling of the Falklands War. But she was a Manchester Liberal, and I don't like Manchester Liberals. Red Sulfur says Blair has crazy eyes. Now, this is Armando Iannucci, again, made fun of this in one of his comedy series, that he looks deranged, absolutely deranged. But it was decided by the media, no, we're not going to talk about that for some reason. There's a story by Wolfgang Streeck in Unheard called Angela Merkel's Empty Leadership. When she left office, Angela Merkel was celebrated across Europe as a benevolent and circumspect leader who had led the continent through a succession of serious calamities. This was in striking contrast to her public image during the Greek debt crisis, when cartoonists depicted her in SS uniform, resplendent with swastika. But those cartoons were for the masses only. The European political elites, all of them, happily voted with the Merkel government when it came to disciplining the Greek dissidents. They were as eager as the Germans to keep European monetary union alive. Merkel has left Europe to a political class to whom she has not only taught the trickery of two-level politics, national and supranational, but whom she has also in part brought to or kept in office. It is a political class that has bet its future on a Europe built around a German hegemony. In many parts of Europe, it is still considered a pleasant surprise to see a German who is soft-spoken with good manners, a wide heart, and a big purse, smiling rather than shouting. This proved useful in her rise to becoming informal ruler of the continent. It also helped that she was a woman, someone who could be pictured as a nourishing mother, as opposed to a punishing father. That's funny, because I never got those Eviga vibes from Angela Merkel. Quite the opposite, in fact. She always looked as if she had just, bitten into something that tasted horrible, and she wanted to spit it out, but she couldn't, because she's in public. Yes, Angela Merkel has no children, which is kind of a hallmark of being womanly, right? But let's go to, hang on, let me scroll up to the top here. Let's go to another issue, another article from Unheard by Mary Harrington, as you know, is a favorite here. It's called The Feminist Case Against Abortion. When will society see mothers as people? This year, Erica Bacciocchi won the dubious honor of being perhaps the first feminist to have been threatened with no platforming by a conservative association for being too conservative. In late November, the female board members of New York University's Conservative Law Association, the Federalist Society, resigned over its decision to invite the feminist legal scholar to speak. In their view, Bacciocchi's campaigning work against abortion renders her beyond the pale. America's abortion debate has always been fraught, but this past year it has been particularly eventful. Whether the introduction of heartbeat rule restrictions in Texas, a challenge to those restrictions by the Satanic Temple, or the recent Dobbs v. Jackson women's health case challenging the constitutionality of a Mississippi law banning abortion after 15 weeks, it's been a bumper time for heated debates about the morality, legality, and broader social implications of allowing women to terminate pregnancy. Bacciocchi and her opponents are speaking from either side of what is perhaps feminism's central question: how to balance individual freedom against our human obligation to dependence. It's a debate Bacciocchi traces back to the very dawn of modernity in The Rights of Women, Reclaiming a Lost Vision. Her title is an homage to her subject, Mary Wollstonecraft, whose A Vindication of the Rights of Women from 1792 is widely viewed as the first proto-feminist text of the modern age. The pop history of liberal feminism tends to start with the campaign for suffrage and tells a linear story of progress toward autonomy for both men and women on exactly the same terms. Wollstonecraft is consistently claimed for this camp as a foremother of modern feminism, but Bacciocchi in her book sets out to reclaim Wollstonecraft from the progressives. Wollstonecraft's 18th century world vibrated with new thinking on reason and individual liberty, which was driving revolutionary ferment in France and America. But she points out these debates also wrestled with an intractable fact. Autonomy is a more straightforward proposition for men than women. Women in Wollstonecraft's day had little control over their fertility save by practicing sexual abstinence. Babies and children take a lot of looking after. How then were ideals of individual liberty to be balanced with the evidently asymmetrical burdens of human reproduction? The godfather of modern liberalism, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, solved the question of sex asymmetry in Émile by excluding women. Only men were eligible for autonomous liberal subjecthood, while women should be educated to serve as pleasing, compliant, and fertile support humans. Wollstonecraft demurred, as well she might. But she didn't do so by arguing that men and women were indistinguishable. For if this idea remains contentious today amid bitter political rows over male-bodied trans athletes in women's sport, it was self-evidently absurd in an age without reliable birth control and heavily powered by manual labor. Rather, she acknowledged men's and women's asymmetrical physiology, especially where reproduction is concerned. Now, to see Mary Harrington write this, so very controversial. Well, this has only been controversial, for a couple of generations? Let's compare men to women. Men can get women pregnant, but only women can conceive and deliver babies. And these babies have a special attachment to their mothers. This is a vast difference between the sexes. But again, it's very controversial for some reason to state the obvious now. As the Harrington continues, as the pro-life feminist Claire de Jong put it in 1978, accepting the necessity of abortion is accepting that pregnant women and mothers are unable to function as persons in this society. Joe Biden's recent description of mothers as locked out of the workforce by caregiving responsibilities is typical. Mothers are, in effect, ineligible to the prevailing conception of personhood, which is based on market participation, except when we detach ourselves from caregiving, which is seen largely as an obstacle to that participation and therefore to self-realization. I'll just comment that some years ago, the former editor of Canada's Financial Post, a woman, actually wrote a column where she said that women that did not work outside the home were traitors because they were not contributing to the GDP, which is, of course, the false idol that we all worship now. Harrington continues, an unborn child is absolutely dependent on its mother, and she cannot be replaced. Within an atomized understanding of what humans are, we have no way of weighing competing interests in such a context. And if personhood relies on us having absolute autonomy over our bodies, we must begrudge any claim, however slight, of a dependent baby still contained in that body, lest its rights-bearing nature conflict with ours. Polls consistently show us to be ambivalent on this question across both sexes. More women than men believe life begins at conception, while in this 2017 poll, 41% of UK women supported reducing the gestation limit to 12 weeks or lower, compared to 24% of men. Oh, yes. And then she quotes Peter Singer, who is one of the foulest people ever to have been born. Again, I'll remind you, you may have heard me say this before, I'll remind you again, I think it was in the 1980s, Peter Singer argued when he was a professor in Australia that we should come up with a slave class of humans, deliberately breed an epsilon class, if you will, Aldous Huxley, in order to do all the demeaning work. And these brute beasts, would not have any rights because they're not really human, being so stupid. Yes, that is the great ethicist, Peter Singer. And in Schadenfreude news, this is from Andrew Mark Miller at Fox News, U.S. Representative Mary Scanlon, Democrat of Pennsylvania, was carjacked at gunpoint in Philadelphia Wednesday as crime continues to surge in major cities across the country. Mary Scanlon, yes. Whenever you see political stupidity in America and Canada, it's as likely as not to be from a member of the Irish diaspora. Scanlon's phone and purse were stolen by the attacker. Police say Scanlon was approached by two black males, approximately 20 to 30, as she walked to her vehicle before they demanded she hand them the keys. She handed over the keys to her blue 2017 Acura MDX, and one of the suspects drove it away while the other drove away in a dark-colored SUV. Scanlon represents Pennsylvania's 5th congressional district, which includes parts of South Philadelphia. So far in 2021, the Philadelphia Police Department has reported 521 homicides, which is a 13% increase compared to 2020, and the city's highest number of killings since at least 2007. Incidents involving a shooting have also increased by 4.4%, and the number of people who are victims of a shooting has risen by almost 3% over the past year. The city of Philadelphia is seeing at least an 80% increase in carjackings in 2021 compared to the total number in 2020. And guess what? Representative Scanlon is a champion of defunding the police. Scanlon was not the first prominent Democratic official to be carjacked in a crime-ridden city in the last 24 hours. On Tuesday, Illinois Democratic State Senate Majority Leader Kimberly Lightford and her husband were carjacked in Broadview, Illinois, in the Chicago area, where crime has been surging. Okay, let's fire policemen and replace them with social workers, because that can only work out, right? How could that possibly go wrong? Here's a story from the Washington Examiner by Daniel Chaitin. Biden administration sources and conservative donors targeted in FBI raids on Project Veritas, attorney says. FBI raids against Project Veritas appear to be part of a political witch hunt meant to root out secret government sources and conservative donors, according to an attorney for the conservative group. Harmeet Dillon told Fox News host Tucker Carlson this week that Justice Department knew Project Veritas did not have a diary belonging to Ashley Biden, the youngest daughter of President Joe Biden, when FBI agents scoured multiple locations tied to the group last month. That effort was part of an investigation into its disappearance, which included a search of the home of founder James O'Keefe. Well, apparently, Hunter Biden has this habit of leaving highly incriminating information lying around. And his niece also has a habit of leaving highly incriminating information around. This might have something to do with the fact that they're both drug monsters. Jonathan Turley writes about this story at his blog. He wrote a column in The Hill on the continued FBI investigation of the loss of Ashley Biden's diary. The use of the FBI in this case raises, again, the question of whether federal officials are being used to address a family scandal. While Attorney General Merrick Garland was criticized for launching a federal task force on threats against school boards based on a handful of local cases, he has been largely silent on any federal effort to deal with this actual crime wave. That is despite the fact that these attacks are organized on social media, and experts think it's likely the stolen items are being sold on the internet. That is all interstate conduct and would allow for federal enforcement. Yes, but apparently Ashley Biden leaving her diary in a flop house and someone picking up this diary and intending, I don't know, to sell it for money. Somehow this is a crucial priority of the FBI. Oh, yes. You're not allowed to criticize Joe Biden because he's just the nicest guy and the bestest president. And he's going to beat that COVID thing, well, eventually, I suppose. This is from Twitchy. If you notice NBC News journal Andrea Mitchell trending for much of the day, it's because she didn't automatically pass along economic claims from multiple Biden administration personnel as totally factual. Virginia Kruta tweeted, so lefty Twitter is mad at Andrea Mitchell because she refuses to play the White House's "what you're seeing isn't real" game on supply chain and inflation. Just me at Melindo45 tweeted, liberals are triggered. Andrea Mitchell supposedly called Biden a liar. Matt Simon tweeted, Biden's so bad that even MSNBC's Andrea Mitchell called him out. From the Palmer report, Andrea Mitchell's latest attacks on Biden are dishonest and disgraceful. She should resign and take Chuck Todd with her. Chuck Todd is pretty reliably leftist, but apparently he says, yeah, maybe the Democratic president, whatever he's done, is not the best thing. Outrageous. Brooklyn Dad Defiant. Who else agrees that MSNBC would be much better with Andrea Mitchell on the air? Irma Spikamama tweeted, Andrea Mitchell used to be a journalist. Now she's the Jerry Springer of MSNBC. Golly, I'm old enough to remember Republican journalists like Bob Novak, who had no hesitation in criticizing decisions or statements made by Republican Party politicians, because that's what journalists are supposed to do. Good times. Good times. It's a story on VDare here by Michelle Malkin. It's a very sad story. Say his name, murdered Trump supporter Lee Keltner, the owner of Crossfire Hats in Brighton, Colorado. He made bespoke cowboy hats, and everyone seemed to have a high opinion of him, and he was essentially murdered for political reasons by a Trump hater. And of course, it is 2 days from Christmas, so the Pope has something to say about this. This is from Nicole Winfield at the Associated Press. Pope demands humility in new zinger-filled Christian speech, because that's what exactly we're looking from the Pope is zingers. Pope Francis urged Vatican cardinals, bishops, and bureaucrats Thursday to embrace humility. Coming from Pope Francis, ho ho, very satirical, this Christmas season, saying their pride, self-interest, and the glitter of our armor was perverting their spiritual lives and corrupting the church's mission. Golly, is he a confessor to any of these cardinals, bishops, and bureaucrats? How would he know what was perverting their spiritual lives? Does he consider himself to be God-like? As he has in the past, Francis used his annual Christmas address to take Vatican administrators to task for their perceived moral and personal failings, denouncing in particular those pride-filled clerics who rigidly hide behind Catholic Church traditions rather than seek out the neediest with humility. No, apparently, Jesus said, go and sin no more to the prostitute, but that would be rigid. So, anyone who says that is wicked. Francis said, quote, "The humble are those who are concerned not simply with the past, but also with the future, since they know how to look ahead to spread their branches, remembering the past with gratitude. The proud, on the other hand, simply repeat, grow rigid, and enclose themselves in that repetition, feeling certain about what they know and fearful of anything new because they cannot control it. As a consequence, they neither learn from their sins nor are they genuinely open to forgiveness. This is a tremendous corruption disguised as a good. We need to avoid it." Unquote. Again, as I said a few days ago, does this fellow anti-Pope Francis, does he ever say anything when he is not snarling? And Christmas is exactly the best time for a prelate like Francis to snarl. I'm going to talk about Canada in a minute, but let's look at the chat. Pope Zinger, says Oscar Toe. Jesus has some zingers, though, I must admit, he said. Popcasso88 says, my cousins are excited about getting boosters on Christmas Day. Oy. Brooklyn Dad Defiant is the best Twitter account, says Oscar Toe. One wonders how many is... Okay, I'm not going to repeat that. I'm sure Creepy Joe did nothing inappropriate in the shower, says Che Blutarski. Yeah, I don't really know what, Joe Biden has done. But, in public, one does not creep on women, especially when one is being photographed. One does not lean in and sniff their hair or grab their bodies, especially when they're children. This is simply not done. Oh, yeah, but Joe, he's a touchy-feely guy. Okay, I get that. But no, you don't grab children. And it just... Half Galician, hello, says, and they did nothing to develop it. Only British management brought some infrastructure. And this is with regard to Palestine. Red Sulfur said, when the Ottomans were in power, Palestine was in relative peace. Crazy Frog says a girl croupier made a mistake on the tables. One of the security walked in the staff room and gave her a huge slap in the face in front of everyone. Afternoon TV was all women getting beaten. Singer also supported infanticide, if I remembered correctly, says Metal Mike. Red Sulfur says, I feel very safe in Turkey, much more so than America. Half Galician says, there is a big Turk presence in Brooklyn, lots of restaurants near Coney Island. Okay. I watched Angel Heart in this. Angel Heart, ugh. I don't really like to see. I find nothing erotic about blood. And yeah, okay, I'm going to have sex with a hot young woman. No, please don't pour blood over me. Don't do that. Because that's really going to, kill the buzz there. No, don't do that. Okay, let's talk about Justin Trudeau. And again, it's Christmas time. So what's the most ridiculous things that one could say about Justin Trudeau? This is from Matthew Horwood at the Hill Times. With year-end interviews, Trudeau takes on a Father Canada role to reassure country on what lies ahead, say politicos. This is terrible journalism. Say politicos. No, you're saying it, Matthew Horwood. Father Canada? Oh, it's not enough that he's a dictator, but now he's the beloved father of our country. In contrast with the more combative interview style of his father, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, Justin Trudeau's end-of-year conversations with select journalists showed patience and expertise at subtly reframing difficult questions to his benefit, while reassuring Canadians about what the country faces in 2022, according to Politicos. Yaroslav Bran, managing principal at Earnscliffe Strategy Group, in other words, a PR spiv, who ran Conservative Party communications during the 2004, 2006, and 2008 federal elections, said Trudeau's approach to the interviews was a Father Canada sort of role. He was sending a reassuring signal that things are under control, he's on the job, and he's got Canadians back. There was a lot of replication of core government messaging that we've become accustomed to hearing. You're not going to get anything honest out of PR spivs. And I'll repeat my demand that all PR spivs who are published in the media, at the end of the story, there has to be a list of all of their present and past clients. Oh, we all love Justin Trudeau. You know, I predicted years ago that his shtick was going to become tiresome really quickly because of, the internet, where things just get repeated, duplicated, amplified so quickly, so often. It's like I compared him to Lady Gaga. Oh, here's Lady Gaga with her outrageous outfits. And again, it didn't take long before people said, yeah, this is boring. Strange thing about Lady Gaga, when you take off get rid of the ridiculous clothing and the ridiculous makeup, she's actually a good looking woman. So why does she do this? And Canadians are smug. Here we go. What do you get for the Prime Minister who has everything? Masks, socks, and Trump toilet paper. Presents sent to Justin Trudeau suggest that Canadians' concerns for his health and comfort vary widely. Althea Raj writes. This is like, I sometimes get the impression that living in Canada is very much like living in North Korea, except for, the hunger and such like. During the pandemic, Canadians have sent Prime Minister Justin Trudeau masks, socks, books, chocolates, even toilet paper with Donald Trump's face on it. This gift giving, from a Holy Bible to a drawing of Trudeau as Superman, has continued as the Prime Minister prepares to celebrate Christmas and his 50th birthday on December the 25th. According to documents released under the Access to Information Act, fans from across Canada and beyond have sent Trudeau tokens of their affection. Between October 19th, 2019 and July 23rd, 2020, Trudeau received more than 305 gifts. They include at least 86 masks. While most were reusable and many hand-sewn, one person sent a box of N95s. 57 books. The titles ranged from Understanding First Nations, the Legacy of Canadian Colonialism, to The Economy of Canada, and 7 Weeks to a Transformed Marriage. 10 pieces of artwork. A light-up painting of Parliament, 3 drawings of Trudeau, and a series of paintings focused on Indigenous men in prison. 4 pairs of socks. 2 T-shirts. The slogan, Diversity Breathes Here, and Flatten the Curve. Flatten the curve? Well, there's a golden oldie for you. 2 containers of Speaking Moistly lip balm, 1 silk scarf, 1 bottle of wine, 1 Star Wars Stormtrooper figurine, 1 box of vinyl gloves, open size large, 1 Canadian flag. One person sent Trudeau a humble gift of their writing. I hope my simple words will bring some comfort during these troubled times, and I wish you well, the person wrote. Their parcel was postmarked by the United States Postal Service. Okay. So in another example of smug Canadianism, Dale Smith, writing at theline.substack.com, the Washington Post clearly doesn't get Canada. He begins, it's becoming a bit of a habit. The Washington Post publishes an inflammatory column by one of its go-to Canadians, J.J. McCullough, only for the Canadian politics Twitter sphere to erupt in outrage and hate clicks because McCullough had once again gotten something important totally wrong. But as much as people rightfully rail about how McCullough continues to get away with this in the pages of a major and prestigious American newspaper, a number of questions need to be asked of the Post itself, such as why it's content to publish stuff that doesn't accurately portray how things work or don't in Canada. This is what Canadian journalists spend most of their time doing, arguing or demanding that anyone who disagrees with them be silenced or canceled. This is a bugman response. Essentially, anyone who disagrees with me doesn't deserve to live. And I suppose the writer that I was talking about, Dale Smith, is a homosexual, and J.J. McCullough is a homosexual, so this could be seen as a typical homosexual And in my more Canadian news, this is from Ashley Burke at the CBC. Canadian Air Task Force commander relieved of duties in Kuwait after claims of inappropriate comments. Lieutenant Colonel Philip Marcus among nation's highest-ranking officers at headquarters in Kuwait. And again, Canadians don't seem to have forgotten what the purpose of the military is. The military is in the killing business. And people who are involved in the killing business frequently have salty language. But no, we can't have that because the purpose of the Canadian Forces, not the Canadian Armed Forces, they're officially called the Canadian Forces because armed forces is a little too aggressive for Canada. It's just a laboratory. It's a social revolutionary laboratory, and it's a pipeline for PTSD lawsuits. That is the sole purpose now of the Canadian military. On the topic of censorship, this is from RT. Berlin forces EU satellite operator to take RT's German TV broadcast off the air. European satellite operator Eutelsat removed the 24-hour German language RTDE channel from its platform under pressure from Berlin. RT has called the move illegal. Well, I guess the Germans, might be reading things, hearing things that are not approved. And we can't have that. So we'll just take them off the air. And, Dante Wright. Mentioned earlier, this is from VDare, a column by Ann Coulter. They're doing it again. The New York Times is aggressively hiding relevant facts on a matter of public interest simply in order to promote the narrative of Black victimhood. Okay, we didn't get away with it last time, and I guess that would be the Kyle Rittenhouse case, but we probably will this time. Let's try. Dante Wright is the half-black man fatally shot by a police officer in Minnesota earlier this year. According to Nexus, he has appeared in well over 100 articles in the Times. But one thing Times readers will never be told is that Wright was facing criminal charges for trying to choke a woman to death while robbing her at gunpoint. They will also never hear about the lawsuit accusing Wright and an accomplice of shooting a guy during a carjacking. In a bold departure from customary practice, the Times did make two passing references to another lawsuit claiming Wright shot a guy in the head, permanently disabling him, but in both cases quickly added, the lawsuit offers no direct evidence tying Mr. Wright to the shooting. And those are just the crimes he's accused of committing lately during the brief year and a half since he turned 18 and was no longer treated as a juvenile. When it comes to Wright's legal problems, the Times didn't even pull its usual trick of putting all the interesting information in paragraph 20. These grisly allegations, as set forth in police reports and lawsuits, have been completely 100% censored from the so-called newspaper of record. This isn't a genteel refusal to put the victim on trial. Wright's short but exciting criminal record is highly relevant to the convulsions this country has been going through since George Floyd's death at the hands of the police in 2020, convulsions painstakingly fostered by the Times. Contrary to the media's Black victimhood narrative, there's a very good reason Wright was in a position to be confronted by the police, and in a way that most people are not. In addition to allegedly committing a slew of gun crimes before the age of 20, based on only 18 months of public records, Wright was stopped for driving with expired license plate tags. He didn't have car insurance. He also didn't have a driver's license. And yes, white people are busted for these infractions all the time. When the officers ran his name, they discovered that Wright was driving on a suspended license. There was a restraining order against him and a bench warrant for his arrest on a weapons charge. They had no choice. They had to arrest him. But as one officer began to handcuff him, Wright resisted, jumped back in his car, and was about to flee, along with an officer trapped in the passenger window, trying to get control of the gears. That's when Wright got shot. I'm just, George Floyd, Dante Wright, there's so many other cases. Is this what they call suicide by cop? Do these people conclude that their lives are so worthless that they should, do their best to be killed by the police so that their relatives will get a multi-tens of $1 million settlement, from the authorities. This is the conclusion that I have been driven to. You know, resisting arrest, fighting with the police, this is not a good idea. It's not a good idea for anyone, regardless of your color. But, as I said about George Floyd, how would he have been punished for attempting to pass a counterfeit $20 bill? Would he have been thrown in the slammer? No, he would not. So why don't you just get into the police car? Okay. Why don't you just do that? Because again, starting fights with police for anyone is a bad idea. And I think everyone knows that. Steve Saylor points to a story which has got a lot of attention, how the Native American population in the U.S. increased 87%, says more about whiteness than about demographics, by Circe Sturm, professor of anthropology at the University of Texas at Austin College of Liberal Arts. Professor Sturm und Drang looks like a 1970s pop singer, which is okay by me. Did her parents give her this name, as a warning to men to stay away? Because if I ran into a woman called Circe Sturm, Sturm, of course, meaning storm in German, I would think, yeah, this is going to be trouble. More trouble than I need. Steve Saylor admits, on the other hand, the name Circe Sturm sounds like a warning label. The Native American population in the U.S. grew by a staggering 86.5% between 2010 and 2020, according to the latest U.S. Census, a rate demographers say is impossible to achieve without immigration. But Native American Indians are not immigrating to the United States from foreign countries because they wouldn't be Native Americans, would they? Instead, individuals who previously identified as white are now claiming to be Native American. This growing movement has been captured by terms like pretendian and wannabe. Another way to describe this recent adoption of Native American identity is what I call racial shifting. Sturm writes, I spent 14 years researching the topic and interviewing dozens of race shifters for my book, Becoming Indian. I learned that while some of these people have strong evidence of Native American ancestry, others do not. Circa 1990, with the Oka crisis in Canada, this was just like daily, all over the news, CBC News, The National, the latest from the siege. And one of the Native Indian leaders there at Oka, I noticed that she had blonde hair and green eyes. Indians do not have blonde hair and green eyes. Perhaps there is some Indian admixture there in you, but you are not even half Indian and probably not even 25% Indian. But of course, it seems that anyone who calls himself or herself an Indian gets to be one. Oh, again from Circe Sturm. As one woman from Missouri put it, they forced us to be white, act white, live white, and that is a very, very degrading feeling. Oh, so on the one hand, we have white supremacy, where the white people just run everything. And if anyone disagrees with them, shut up, you're not white. We're in charge, you're not. But so being told that you are white and acting like white people, that is a very, very degrading feeling, is it? No, I don't think so. White people make the things that everyone likes. This is as I see it, it's like Osama bin Laden said, it's the strong horse, weak horse. That in the past, non-white people or partially white people went to great lengths to what they call pass. Oh no, I'm entirely white. Yes, my skin is a little dark, but I'm Spanish or Portuguese or Italian or something like that. Now it's the reverse. That the one drop of blood rule has actually been reversed, where you have Kamala Harris calling herself a black woman, where she is probably, like 1/4, 33% black. She is, on the other hand, 50% Tamil Brahmin, but the constituency for that in the United States is not that large. Let's go back to the chat. Okay. Cat people have green eyes, says Metal Mike. Yes. Was there ever even compelling evidence against Maxwell? I never heard. That would be Ghislaine Maxwell, says Oscar Toe. Well, it's been all over the media since the trial began that the prosecution is supposedly booting the case. I don't know whether it's true or not. John S. says, nope, KMG, not suicidal, low impulse control, and rock bottom IQ. Yes, Metal Mike says it's very obvious that the prosecutor in Maxwell's case has orders to ensure nothing incriminating about anyone important gets out. The trial is rigged. Oscar Toe says, if I were Peter Thiel, I would pay Kevin well. A friend of mine, an old friend of mine in American journalism, got invited to some big deal hotshot conference. And it turned out that Peter Thiel had taken an interest in him. Professional interest, I should mention. And I guess it's a very good thing if Peter Thiel takes a professional interest in you. Palpicasso 88 says, I'll send him the greatest hits of Judy Garland and a guide to coming out to friends and family. Partridge in a Pear Tree. Ugh. That song is interminable. Interminable. John S. says North Koreans seem far less feminine and obsequious. Who else do we have here? Freddy Krueger with syringes as fingers come to mind. Hey kids, time for your booster, says Metal Mike. Hunter's behavior is indicative of inappropriate sexual conduct as a child, says Chogokin 666. I don't know. Perhaps it is. I mean, these days, anyone who is accused or, convicted of sexual crimes against children claims that it happened to them as children. I'm sure in many cases it did, but there's no, we have no way of knowing. Metal Mike says almost 6,000 cases today in Ontario, 80% fully vaxxed. How about that, huh? How about that? Of course, I predicted this weeks ago, but I've made many predictions over the years that have come true. But Tom Wolfe wrote a famous essay about the perils of being right too early. Wasn't there a SCTV 12 Days of Christmas with something about beer? I don't remember that. Okay, let's have some Joseph Tainter, the collapse of complex societies and reasons for collapse. Other complex societies. In some scenarios, competition with other complex societies is a cause of collapse through various causal mechanisms. Lanning, for instance, suggests the competition between empires may have led to the demise of Huari and Tihuanaco. R.E.W. Adams pursues a similar argument for Teotihuacan. Blanton follows a similar attack. He suggests that political centralization at Monte Alban in the Valley of Oaxaca was a competitive response to the threat from Teotihuacan. With the collapse of the latter, this need vanished. At the same time, growth of population would have led to filling of agricultural land and thus to increased disputes over this resource. The result would be a strain on the adjudicative authorities, including Monte Alban. With declining surpluses for supporting this political center and its decreasing effectiveness at administration, the population became unwilling to support a political hierarchy that had lost its military role. Although there may be too many unverifiable factors in Blanton's argument, land disputes, willingness of a population to support a political center, it will have a certain appeal to integration theorists, although little or none to conflict theorists. Lanning's arguments about competition between empires raises matters that will be discussed in more depth in the final chapter of this book. At this point, it will suffice to say that conflict between empires more often leads to expansion of the victor than to the collapse of both. Major instances of collapse, such as that of Rome, cannot be explained by this principle. Intruders. One of the most common explanations for collapse ascribes it to the effects of intruding populations, typically at a lower level of complexity than the society on which they impinge. Such scenarios are common in Europe, the Near East, and China, where literary traditions often refer to barbarian migrations. Intruder explanations are also to be found in the New World, with limited literary allusion, more often in some areas than in others. In a major review of theories of the Mayan collapse, as these stood in the early 1960s, George Cowgill listed destruction of reservoirs by intruders as a possible contributor. Jeremy Sabloff, Gordon Willey, and Richard E.W. Adams, based on work in the Rio Passion region, have constructed a scenario of invasion through this sector as a major factor in the collapse. And I'll have more from Joseph Tainter tomorrow. And oh yes, Candace Owens is at loggerheads with Donald Trump over vaccines. This is from Colby Hall at Mediaite. Former President Trump pushed back on Candace Owens when the conservative commentator appeared to argue against the efficacy of the COVID-19 vaccines. Trump joined the Daily Wire host for a wide-ranging interview, which was released Wednesday, in which the two pushed various conspiracy theories surrounding the riot in the U.S. Capitol January 6th. But the issue of vaccines came up, and the former president continued to tout the efficacy of the vaccines in a manner that will likely encourage some of the vaccine hesitant and eventually save lives. That is an unproved claim, especially since it turns out that the vaccines have no efficacy whatsoever with regard to the Omicron variant. But no, get your jab. Get the second jab. Get the third jab. Save lives. This is what counts as a news story today. Trump took credit for the incredible speed at which the vaccinations were developed during his administration in a partnership with private pharmaceuticals. Private pharmaceuticals? No, they're not pharmaceuticals. They're pharmaceutical companies. Doesn't anyone know how to write anymore? Reiterating a point, or repeating, as some people might say, he made over the weekend during Bill O'Reilly. The vaccine is one of the greatest achievements of mankind. That's a quote. I came up with a vaccine with 3 vaccines, Trump said. All are very, very good. Came up with 3 of them in less than 9 months. It was supposed to take 5 to 12 years. Maybe it should have taken 5 to 12 years. If you've been listening to my live stream from the onset, I was exceedingly dubious about Trump's warp speed attitude towards vaccines. If we believe in science, and if we believe in the development of medical interventions which are going to help people more than they hurt them, we don't want to rush it. Owens interjected, yet more people have died under COVID this year. She then pivoted to hit the current administration, saying, by the way, under Joe Biden, then under you, and more people took the vaccine this year. So people are questioning how. Trump interrupted, oh no, the vaccine works, but some people aren't the ones. The ones who get very sick and go to the hospital are the ones that don't take the vaccine, but it's still their choice. And if you take the vaccine, you're protected. Well, as much as I love Donald Trump, I see that with regard to COVID-19, he is simply not keeping up with the data. As you know, it is very difficult for people to say that they were mistaken about things. I mean, even for ordinary people. Yeah, that was stupid. I shouldn't have done that. Yeah, that really led to bad consequences. Golly, I apologize. I can't apologize enough. That almost never happens. People will stick to their guns. As Oberyn, my journalistic hero, once said, whenever I'm accused of something, I deny it hotly and then try to lie my way out of it. Now, this is an interesting story, which confirms which many of us have believed. Again, this question of the data. This is from Free West Media. Study reveals that unjabbed are better informed than jabbed. A German political scientist, Ulrike Gurl, has demonstrated how anti-vaccination opponents are better informed, citing a study by the MAT, which analyzed the tweets of so-called anti-vaccination agents very carefully. Dateline Bonn. In Germany, some 70% are vaccinated, 30% are vaccinated, and of the 70%, about 40% did not get vaccinated because they believed the propaganda, but because they were forced to do so in order to work and move around freely. And those who are unvaccinated are not only more knowledgeable, but will never be convinced to take the jab, the MAT study showed. Gurl, political scientist at the University of Bonn, believes that mandatory vaccination is being introduced in Germany and Austria through the back door of 2G rules, allowing only those who are jabbed and recovered to take part in society. Quote, the pandemic has absolutely divided society. A sorting process is in progress. You only invite the people to your home for spaghetti and wine who are on the same page when it comes to corona. In fact, I no longer have any zero COVID friends, but surround myself with many people who, like me, are critical of the measures. Especially in public, we no longer have any factual discussions at all. The disparagement of lateral thinkers, people who should actually be welcome in a democracy, has meant that no one dares to express themselves as being critical of the corona policy. This resulted in a completely closed ceiling of opinion. The measures of good, and whoever speaks against it is a corona denier. And on top of that, right wing. This is a very dangerous development, unquote. Gurl is a professor of European politics and co-director of the Center Ernst Robert Curtius at the Rheinische Friedrich Wilhelms Universität in Bonn. Yes, it's funny that we're supposed to be the ones who are ignorant, but we are actually following the data, whereas our expert opponents are not. And let me open this. Oh, this popped up on Twitter today. And oh yeah, Omicron variant vaccines. They don't seem to be working. Even the triple jab doesn't seem to be working. What to do? Well, Twitter has some advice for us. Experts recommend the use of respiratory masks to prevent the spread of the Omicron variant. Yes, the masks will save us. No, we're supposed to be the vaccines. No, we've moved on from there. The masks are going to save us. But they haven't been saving people before. Shut up. The masks are going to save us. Because of the spread of the Omicron variant across the world, medical experts are recommending the use of N95 and FFP2 masks due to the effectiveness of their filtration systems. And, oh, yes, someone called Rex Chapman, who, didn't this fellow used to be some sort of Midwestern conservative Inc. fellow? He's another person who has completely gone bonkers over COVID. He tweeted 2 days ago, how about we all agree that hospitals have the right to turn away unvaccinated COVID patients? They have freedom of choice too, right? No, they don't actually under American law, which was signed during the Reagan administration. American hospitals are not allowed to turn anyone away, regardless of their ability to pay. Yeah, also under the Reagan administration, a law was passed that stated that hospitals are not allowed to kill babies who've been born because of mental or physical disabilities. Chapman says, I'm sure the unvaccinated would have no problem with that. And it would solve a lot of problems. Who could possibly object? Why should doctors and nurses continue to suffer? Why should non-COVID patients be denied hospital beds? You have a heart attack or some health crisis, you are denied a bed because someone listened to Joe Rogan. Unvaccinated can't possibly object because they don't think the vaccine works. Everybody wins. I wonder if Rex Chapman has any idea about how some people think about him and what they would do to him if they, had the opportunity. But no, we're not going to do that, okay, because we'd grant us certain leeway to people because of their humanity. And if you go to the avatar on Rex Chapman's page, there is a black basketball player with dreads. And if you look at the banner, there's some basketball player from the Charlotte Hornets. Once again, these boomers who have gone COVID mad, if you go to their Twitter feeds, you find that they're all sports ball addicts. And it would appear that being a sports ball addict rots the brain, But we're told to listen to the authorities and only to the authorities because the authorities have always been right. Right? Let's see. February 2021, a bunch of scientists on the Biden-Harris Transition COVID-19 Advisory Board tells Americans to take whatever vaccine they can get. They're all great, and they're 100% effective. February 2021, Dr. Fauci says the vaccinations will stop hospitalizations and deaths. They are 100% at preventing deaths. July 2021, Joe Biden goes on TV with CNN host Don Lemon to say that if you're vaccinated, you won't catch COVID. Here's an exact quote from that interview. You're not going to get COVID if you have these vaccinations. Well, that has turned out to be incorrect. But no, just wear a mask, a better mask, more expensive mask. So Joe and Jill Biden invited singing nurses to perform in the East Room of the White House. And there's a bunch of them, female and male, white and black, wearing their scrubs, pajamas, in other words. They are not singing. They are lip syncing. And Kane at Citizen Free Press comments, I imagine this is what North Korean TV looks like. Tick-tock nurses, don't you just love them? Well, here's another prediction that I made, which has come true rather quickly. I've been referring a lot to the site CP24, Canadian Press, 24-hour news, and their coverage of the COVID-19 data from the province of Ontario, Canada's most populous province. Well, we have an update today from Chris Fox. Ontario is reporting a record 5,790 new cases of COVID-19 over the last 24 hours as the Omicron variant continues to trigger a pre-holiday surge in lab-confirmed infections. It is the highest single-day case count ever reported, easily surpassing the then record 4,812 infections that were confirmed at the height of the third wave of the pandemic on April the 16th. Okay, so I see this story, so I scroll down or do Control F. Let's have a breakdown of the numbers. Unknown vaccination status, partially vaccinated, fully vaccinated, unvaccinated. Guess what? This story does not contain that data because Chris Webb, or likely one of his bosses at Canadian Press, said, I know we've been reporting this, but we have to stop reporting this because the data are showing people that the viruses have no efficacy against the Omicron variant. And that's what's happened here. That's what happened. Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Kieran Moore, said earlier this week that only 15 of the more than 4,000 lab-confirmed cases involving the Omicron variant have required hospitalization so far. But he has warned that hospitalizations will inevitably increase. Yes, of course. Of course. So there is a fleeting mention here of the truth. Of the 6,000 cases confirmed Thursday, more than 1,100 involved individuals who are not fully vaccinated, roughly equaling their overall share of the population. And again, I've been predicting this for weeks. Oh, you want to play the ratio game? Sure, I'll play the ratio game, but the ratio is changing and to the detriment of your argument. And now the ratio is exactly even, but we know that it is going to turn soon to help the arguments of the purebloods. This is from Phil Sikoris at CTV News. People in Ontario are selling rapid COVID-19 tests online for hundreds of dollars. Such idiocy. Oh, but did you know that far more people have died of COVID than has been reported? They're actually pushing this line again. This is from by Dylan Bergen, Betsy Bladizets, Jade Kincaid, and Derek Kravitz, the Brown Institute for Media Innovation and Muckrock's Documenting COVID-19 Project, Sarah Hasselhorst, the Clarion Ledger, Ashley White and Andrew Capps, the Daily Advertiser, Rudy Keller, the Missouri Independent, Nada Hassanine, and USA Today. This is pure agitprop. oh yeah, all these people are dying, but it was actually COVID. But stupid doctors didn't put COVID on the death certificate. This goes against everything we know to be true, since the United States federal government pays much more for COVID patients than non-COVID patients. It is built into the system that doctors get more money, hospitals get more money if they deem it to be a COVID case and not, say, cancer or a heart attack. This is from Joseph Curl at the Daily Wire. Majority of people who contract Omicron may never show symptoms, according to researchers. And that explains why Omicron is particularly dangerous. One might say a biological Fukushima. And this is from interesting question, Ian Hodgson at the Tampa Bay Times. Why won't Florida and the Centers for Disease Control release states' breakthrough COVID data? Breakthrough, they call it. This means breakthrough is a euphemism for the vaccines have no efficacy. For more than 2 months, the Tampa Bay Times and other news organizations have been asking Florida for data that breaks down how many vaccinated people have been infected, hospitalized, or died of COVID-19. They're called breakthrough cases, data that would show how efficiently the vaccine has protected Floridians and how vulnerable the unvaccinated are. But the Florida Department of Health has continually refused those requests, citing what public health and legal experts say are misplaced privacy concerns. How is an agglomeration of data on dead people, who, of course, need not be identified, as to their vaccination status, how could this possibly invoke privacy concerns? On that basis, we can't have any data at all involving people, because, it's the people that make the data. I mean, what happens to them? How many people are murdered in Florida every year? We can't tell you that, because that would invoke privacy concerns. The Centers for Disease Control also refuses to release that data, deferring to the state on whether to share it publicly. Well, of course, we know why we're not getting the data, because it would be embarrassing. That simple. And this is from the Globe and Mail. Quebec considers asking hospital workers with COVID-19 to stay on the job. Golly. The Quebec government is floating the idea of asking asymptomatic healthcare workers to stay on the job if they test positive for COVID-19, while other provinces are considering test-to-stay strategies as a means to keeping the fast-spreading Omicron variant from putting a critical mass of nurses and doctors into quarantine. About 45% of Americans have the influenza virus in their body. Viral influenza. Now, typically, pneumonia only attacks people when they have severely compromised immune systems. But imagine if hospitals and employers were to say, oh, you test positive for the pneumonia virus, so you're fired. Or we're going to have to give you a vaccine against pneumonia, not that such a vaccine exists. And oh, hang on. There's a story that I passed over earlier. I think so. Hang on just a sec. This is a story from the Washington Post by Dan Diamond. 5 things about Omicron that I want my friends and family to know. So here's a grown man becoming hysterical and is being paid for it. As a health reporter who's been writing about coronavirus since early January 2020, I often get questions about the pandemic. But after the Omicron variant emerged last month, those questions became more urgent, with some readers complaining of mixed messages about the new variant and existing vaccines, and deeply personal. As friends and family tried to plan their winter holidays, you're a reporter. Why are you writing about yourself? Over the weekend, I wrote a Facebook post. Isn't that special? Trying to distill what I've heard from experts and officials as they race to fight the new variant. A lightly edited version of that post appears here. Omicron might not be mild for the unvaccinated. Brace yourself for a positive test result. Omicron's mutations make it very transmissible. This is exactly what boosters are for. That is an outright lie. An outright lie. because the boosters were on the scene before Omicron even existed. And the data from Ontario and everywhere else, beginning in Israel, shows that the boosters, which is the same thing as dose 1 and dose 2, have little to no efficacy against Omicron. But the Washington Post, which is, remember, that's what democracy dies in darkness, they're lying to us. They're lying to us. This is from Hannah Meow, that's her actual name, at CNBC. The World Health Organization says COVID booster programs limit vaccine supply for poor countries, could prolong pandemic. India's pretty poor by world standards, and Africa's pretty poor by world standards. Somehow they seem to be doing better with COVID than us. I wonder why that might be. From the Times of Israel, in a world first, Israel set to give 4th COVID shot to over 60s at-risk groups. Yeah, and you can see what's coming here, right? You can see what's coming. There's a piece at the Excellence site, a Conservative Woman Co-UK, shameless BBC hosts Big Pharma's drive to get Africa hooked on COVID vaccine. At the end of November, a piece of BBC agitprop to stoke up fervor for vaccinating Africa went viral. As a British citizen of African descent living in London, I was disgusted by it. This woman's name is Rusera Shoniwa. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. I'm concerned that people in Africa may get it, even less than the average Westerner, and I really want to try to reach a few Africans who might be wondering what COVID could mean for them. So let's start by imagining if Big Pharma were to run a modestly honest advertisement to recruit dealers for pushing COVID vaccines in Africa. I must confess that I reverse engineered that ad after watching the successful applicant going through the motions like a performing seal on a BBC World News slot set aside for such agitprop. Following the latest COVID variant hype, the co-chair of the African Union's Vaccine Delivery Alliance, Dr. Ayoade Alakia, announced on the UK's flagship propaganda organ, what is going on right now, the emergence of the Omicron variant, is inevitable. It is a result of the world's failure to vaccinate in an equitable, urgent, and speedy manner. It is a result of hoarding by high-income countries of the world, and quite frankly, it is unacceptable. These travel bans are based in politics and not science. It is wrong, unquote. Abandoning any pretense at journalism, the BBC presenter, Philippa Thomas, played the role of therapist by responding, I hear your anger about the immediate reaction and the lack of action beforehand. The stage direction becomes even more obvious and cringeworthy as Thomas then pauses, providing a cue for the good doctor to glance at her script and resume the televised amateur dramatics. So this is hopefully a dress rehearsal, because until everyone is vaccinated, no one is safe. That is so obviously stupid. Until no one is hungry, until everyone is full, no one can be hungry. But until everyone is safe, there is no safety. This is so obviously wrong. Just so obviously wrong. Some places in the world are better than others. And once again, India and Africa seem to be doing pretty well with regard to COVID-19. Oh, so let's hear from another chief latrine walla who happens to hail from communist China, because I really want to, take advice from women like that. This is from Pam Key at Breitbart. CNN medical analyst Dr. Leanna Wen said Wednesday on CNN's newsroom that President Biden should go further in placing restrictions on Americans who have not got COVID vaccines. Quote, I think what we will see with Omicron is a very large number of infections due to COVID-19. The question, though, is, are we going to see a decoupling of infections with hospitalizations and death? We've already seen it. That would be ideal. The entire point of vaccination, the main point of vaccination, I should say, is to reduce severe illness. And so if we're able to avoid overwhelming our healthcare systems, that would be the goal. Is there going to be a lot of people who get Omicron? Absolutely. But the hope is that enough people have been vaccinated in some parts of the country and many parts of the world that we're going to prevent the worst of it. Again, all the data tells us that the present vaccines, including the booster, are not good in terms of efficacy. But no, get that booster. Gotta get that booster. Oh, and the latest news from dictatorial Australia. This is from Peter Vincent at the Daily Mail. A leading Australian pharmacist says measures such as wearing masks and getting 6 monthly COVID-19 vaccinations could be a reality for many years. No, they won't, because there'll be a revolution before that happens. So I'm going to go to Theatre Thursday shortly, and I'm going to open some tabs here. But before that, I'm going to go back to the chat. Here we go. What do we got? Palcasso 88 says, Five Guys is like that. Manager told me they're too understaffed to check Vax Pass, so they just kept dining room closed. Anran says, Kevin, unless I missed it, you only spoke about what a bad guy Dante Wright was, not about what a miscarriage of justice Potter being convicted was. She was about as NG as Kyle Rittenhouse, NG being not guilty, I guess. Oscar Toe has makes a claim about Dr. Wen. I'll just say, look, I don't. Oh, she came over as her family came over as political refugees. No, in communist China, never seeds so-called political refugees as fifth columnists in foreign countries. I mean, that would be wicked. Texas Feral Hog says Japan beat COVID when they started using the drug, which may not be mentioned. It was a mere coincidence with no causation. My experience in fast food places, let's say for the last year and a half, is that they are so understaffed that the staff they're run off their feet. I know that they're paying people more to work in these places, but it just seems like a very, very unpleasant job, especially since so many people are so close to the edge now. The number of shocking incidents of people, shouting obscenities at people behind the counter or whatever. I've never seen anything like this in my life. True Greenbird says Africa is doing pretty good because they take anti-malaria drugs regularly, e.g. chloroquine. Of course, this will change as vaccination rates rise. Half Galician says some places just kept dining room closed because their staff would not work full day in masks. Yeah, again, I think the longest time that I've been forced to wear a mask since this ridiculous mandate began, 15 months ago or something like that, is when I took the SkyTrain from Surrey to downtown Vancouver, and it was about 25 minutes, and I thought I was suffocating. Quachalango says that East Room video was a national disgrace. Let's see. Chokin 666 says porch pirates ripped open a bunch of boxes, leaving hundreds of sealed COVID tests strewn about my lobby. My Trail of Disgrace says, have you seen the video Fauci in the Hall of the Mountain King on YouTube and Twitter? Indeed, I have. A great editing of Fauci with chronological sequencing of headlines about effectiveness, etc. Yes, and there's a great bit with Bill Gates boasting, foolish for him to have done so, about how much money he is making from vaccines. Half Galician says Trump needs to step aside for DeSantis. Trump simply turns out as many voters against him as for him, which is a recipe to lose in 2024. True Greenbeard says, does the door swing both ways legally? Can business owners deny service to the vaccinated? There is a case to be made that they spread the virus more than the vaccinated. Oscar Toe says, really, the only GOP person I like now is this Massey guy. Yeah. No, apparently, the idea that you could turn away people. Oh, I'm not going to hire you because I don't like you. Yeah, I'm not going to hire you because I don't like the color of your skin or your religion or your sex or whatever. No, that's unconstitutional, supposedly. The right of free association was abrogated in the United States, 60 years ago or something like that. But no, let's stop treating the unvaccinated, even, as I say, Under the Reagan administration, it was made federal law that hospitals cannot turn anyone away, regardless of their ability to pay. And what that means is I had a simple procedure done in a hospital, and then I got a bill for $47,000. That's one of the reasons why you got a bill for $47,000. But let's talk about something happier now, which is the Sctv 1981 Christmas special. Sctv is was a Canadian comedy program, although there were several Americans that appeared in it, including Joe O'Flaherty and Andrea Martin, and in the beginning, Harold Ramis. And it began in, as a syndicated program on ITV. And Sctv, of course, is the famous comedy troupe, acting academy in Chicago being the second city, right? New York being number one, supposedly. And so a peripheral organization was set up in Toronto, and they got an offer from Dr. Allard at ITV, as it then was, in Edmonton, to do a show there. So they did. And many of the greatest comedians were on Sctv, including John Candy, Joe Flaherty, Eugene Levy, Andrea Martin, Rick Moranis, Catherine O'Hara, and Martin Short, and Dave Thomas. And it was on ITV for 3 years. Then it moved to the CBC for 3 years, and they just relentlessly took the piss out of the CBC when they were on the CBC. And then it was on NBC on Friday nights, which led to some untoward comparisons with Saturday Night Live, i.e. Sctv is funny, Saturday Night Live is not. And then it was on Cinemax for its last year. Why is Sctv better than Saturday Night Live? Well, I'll give a couple of reasons. Because it's not live. When one performs live, one goes for the cheap, obvious joke. If something works, you just ram it into the ground. That's what happens with live performances. Also, because if you look at various characters on Saturday Night Live, it's a one joke bit, and it's always a one joke bit. And the same joke is just, oh, Toonces the cat who thinks he can drive a car. Okay, that was funny the first time I saw it, and a little less funny the second time I saw it. And then, are you really going to do this? Or that lady who's the Walmart cashier who just won't shut up. Again, a little funny the first time I saw it. Subsequent times, no, it's just the same setup, the same joke. With Sctv, they created all these comic characters who actually had, lives. They had histories. And they used them in all of these different situations, the same way that people interact with other people in a whole host of different situations. And of course, Second City, there are many topical references on Sctv, nowhere near as many as Saturday Night Live, but that's one of the reasons why Sctv, people watch old Sctv and still laugh. And there are some exceptions, but people generally don't watch old Saturday Night Live things. It's like, oh yes, here's a Gerald Ford joke. Yeah, okay. Who was that guy? But the Christmas special, sometimes referred to as the staff party special, it was kind of a culmination of various themes that had been running through the show for that season. One of which was John Candy playing Johnny Leroux. And Johnny Leroux, he was an actor and he was a producer, an impresario, and never really seemed to be that much of a success. And he was terrorized by the station manager, Guy Caballero, who was in a wheelchair. He didn't need to be in a wheelchair, but he used it for respect. So he has this show called Lunchtime Street Beef, where he goes out, in public and interviews people. And it ends up with him just delivering bizarre rants against Mormons and Koreans. But that was a highlight of Johnny Leroux's character from the beginning. I remember one of the very earliest episodes, Johnny Leroux is, in front of the camera wearing his special Johnny Leroux jacket with the monogram. And he said something like, "A lot of you have been saying that I'm gay. Well, I'm not gay, but even if I were, what difference would it make? Charles Laughton was gay, and he was one of the greatest actors of all time." Like, Charles Laughton, wow, that really came out of nowhere. I have to say that I think one of the reasons SCTV better than Saturday Night Live is because the writing was smarter. Oh, yeah, we're not going to put in a reference to Charles Laughton because no one remembers who he is. Well, here's the thing about jokes. It's not necessary to know who Charles Laughton was in order to get the joke. The joke is that supposedly some accomplished person was homosexual. That's the joke. Okay. I remember reading that on the writing staff, the producers of Futurama and David Cohen, Nixon, we don't want to see Nixon on this show because no one remembers who Nixon was. Well, first of all, that's not true, but you have an angry head in a jar. That's the joke. That's funny. So in the lead up to the Christmas special, you have this film Polynesian Town starring Dr. John, the night tripper. And it has a crane shot. And we see Guy Caballero like jumping out of his wheelchair and screaming about the unnecessary expense of the crane shot. And then later on the street beef segment, we see a helicopter shot, which of course is even more expensive than a crane shot. The show begins with Liberace's Christmas special. And I'm going to have to give you some background for that. Liberace was this flamboyant American pianist of Polish origin, and he was campy. To say that he was campy is really, understating it. In the skit at the end, he says something like, "Christmas is the most frivolous time of year, and I love frivolity." Well, Liberace was a big star. He played classical music. He had a candelabra on his piano, and he wore these ridiculous outfits. And it was really sort of his renditions of these pieces were, well, kitschy. So in 1959, the Daily Mirror, which at the time was the best-selling newspaper in Britain, their columnist William Connor wrote of Liberace, describing him as the summit of sex, the pinnacle of masculine, feminine, and neuter. Everything that he, she, and it can ever want. A deadly, winking, sniggering, snuggling, chromium-plated, scent-impregnated, luminous, quivering, giggling, fruit-flavored, mincing, ice-covered heap of mother love. So Liberace sued the Daily Mirror, claiming this implied that he was a homosexual. And of course, Liberace wasn't a homosexual. He was just waiting for the right woman. We were fed this stuff endlessly when I was a kid. Paul Lynde? No, he's not a homosexual. He's just waiting for the right woman. So there was a lawsuit, and Liberace received an enormous settlement at the time of £8,000. And later he said, "I cried all the way to the bank." Of course, later, Liberace died of AIDS. And one of his lovers went public, his chauffeur, said, "He infected me with AIDS." And this fellow, a rather ugly story, So this is the context for the skit where we see Liberace dressed in, typically outrageous outfit. And he's playing a Christmas song, and there's a very muscular man wearing tight-fitting Santa clothing standing behind him who's whipping him. And Liberace is really enjoying the whipping. And then they move on to Liberace with Orson Welles. And there's a history to this bit. Now, I had not known of the history before I saw the Orson Welles with Liberace bit, but it was still funny because you have a man flying off the handle because of his own incompetence or arrogance. But this is from Wikipedia. Frozen peas is the colloquial term for a blooper audio clip in which American filmmaker Orson Welles performs narration for a series of British television advertisements for Findus. The clip is informally known as In July or Yes Always, based on several of Welles' complaints during the recording. So this company Findus wants Orson Welles to do voiceovers, and they said they wanted him to audition. And Orson Welles was angry. They said, you want me for this, but you don't know what my voice sounds like, which is a reasonable complaint because Orson Welles had one of the most famous voices in America. But Orson Welles takes issue with the scripts, and not only the scripts, the very specific direction that he's given as to what lines to what words to hit in sentences. The recording begins with Welles reading the introduction to a script for a commercial for frozen peas. We know a remote farm in Lincolnshire where Mrs. Buckley lives. Every July, peas grow there. This is terrible. Welles breaks from the script, expressing his dissatisfaction about the timing of the piece, as well as remarking, it's so nice that you see a snow-covered field and say every July peas grow there. We're talking about them growing and she's picked them. A director requests that he emphasize the word in the phrase in July. Welles claims this is impossible to do in a sensible fashion, claiming that the director isn't thinking. Quote, why? That doesn't make any sense. Sorry, there's no known way of saying an English sentence in which you begin a sentence with in and emphasize it. Get me a jury and show me how you can say in July. That's just idiotic, if you'll forgive me for saying so. That's just stupid. In July. I'd love to know how you emphasize in July. Impossible. Meaningless. And another line. We know a certain fjord in Norway near where the cod gather in great shoals. This is just Orson Welles was always up for money, short of money. He was making Chimes at Midnight, Shakespeare adaptation. And so apparently they're going to pay him a fair amount of money. So he got, agreed to humiliate himself by reading these terrible lines. But there are three. Now, again, I had not heard this frozen peas. This was underground legend. This was before the internet. You can find all these things on the internet. Before then, it was like a secret society. It was like the Trogs tapes. So the Trogs, hit band in England in the 1960s, they decide that they're not only going to produce their own record, that they're going to break in a new drummer at the same time. And it just goes horribly wrong, take after take after take. And at one point, Reg Presley, the singer and songwriter, he just explodes in anger because he keeps hearing the playbacks and they're all terrible. And he demands that the engineer record some effing, sprinkle some effing fairy dust on them. It's like, yeah, you see, engineers can make anything sound good, no matter how terrible, because they have that magic in their fingers. But as I say, I never heard it, but later on, I found out that, again, from Wikipedia, amongst Welles' complaints in this scene are 3 direct quotes from the Frozen Peas recording. You don't know what I'm up against. I wouldn't direct any living actor like this in Shakespeare, and no money is worth this. So he's doing a recitation of Good King Wenceslas, and it just goes south from the beginning. He's talking about the snow, deep and crisp and crunchy. And then he tries several times. He just screws up the lines again and again. And then who is moving? Is that light on? Is the camera on me? Is it 1 or 2? And then he walks out. And there's a blink and you'll miss it thing right at the end. As he's storming off the stage, he reaches over and there's this like cornucopia of food. And he carries away an entire cooked turkey. And then we have Elton John on with Liberace. And so it's kind of a duel, a piano duel. And so Liberace plays, this flowery, fruity version of some classical tune. And then Elton John starts playing the same thing, but then, he makes it, sound like Crocodile Rock. But just the attention to detail there, that Liberace's piano, and Liberace is played hilariously by Dave Thomas, it sounds like a classical piano, whereas there's an identical, grand piano that Elton John's playing, but it has this tack piano or barrel house piano sound. And one of the things that was so great about SCTV is that these people had grown up with show business, with old movies and talk shows like Merv Griffin, and they just sort of internalized, this showbiz lore and lingo, But again, I should point out that SCTV was Canadian, not entirely Canadian, but mostly Canadian. And Canadians have kind of an advantage in this regard because they know the United States. Most of them know the United States quite well, but they're not the United States. They're not Americans. So there's this distance, which allows for a satire, which is more subtle. So we see the SCTV staff party, and we get to see old favorites like Jerry Todd, the video DJ. Jerry Todd, Weather, Tex and Edna Boyle, Earl Cannon-Bear, Johnny Leroux or Edith Prickley, the end guy from the Five Neat Guys, who was played hilariously by Joe Flaherty in the original bit as being falling down drunk. And Eugene Levy said in a later interview, it wasn't until I saw the show that I realized that Joe Flaherty was playing him as a drunk. And that wasn't, in the script. It wasn't in the stage direction, that Joe Flaherty just decided to do this because he thought it would be funny. And it was. And so, we have Bob and Doug McKenzie, where we learned a tip about, drinking during family gatherings during the holiday, that use one of those glasses that are opaque. So they call it beer nog. You pretend it's eggnog, but it's beer nog. And so Johnny Leroux, it's Christmas Eve, and Guy Caballero orders him. Johnny Leroux is drunk as a skunk, and he has the gerbils with them, like Playboy Playmates, Penthouse Pets. Well, they're the gerbils that he's going to have to go out of the streets and do Christmas Eve street beef in the freezing cold. He complains about it. And John Candy just does this hilarious, this cringing laughter. Please, please, please. No, and you can't take the gerbils. One mic, one microphone. And we see him go into the street. And of course, it's Christmas Eve. And, I don't know, 9:00 at night. There's nobody on the street. And he's freezing. And he insults, he insults his crew, and they leave. And it looks like Johnny Leroux is actually going to freeze to death on the streets of Edmonton. So we then go to the Sammy Maudlin show, and this is absolutely brilliant what we see here. That Neil Simon and Marsha Mason are the guests, and Neil Simon was the king of Broadway. Well, the king of scripted movies, in the 60s, 70s, into the 80s. And so many of the things that he wrote were about himself. And then he married this actress, Marsha Mason. And he wrote all these things for her. And Marsha Mason, this was referenced in a Seinfeld episode where Jerry had this girlfriend, a painter, played by Catherine Keener, who he didn't want to see her anymore. And so Jerry got this card with this really heart-rending plea. And he thought, wow, this woman really loves me. She's so deep, whatever. It turns out it was cribbed from a Neil Simon movie, that Marsha Mason was known for overacting and for weeping in front of the camera. And we get plenty of that with this glycerin tears on Andrea Martin's face. And he begins the show singing, "Here Comes Santa Claus," in this just over the top showbiz way. Here comes Santa Claus, right down Santa Claus Lane. And then he just erupts into this epic coughing fit because he's smoking a cigarette at the same time that he's singing. He tries to stop the show, He just keeps coughing and coughing and coughing. And then you have one of those title cards, Season's Greetings, with him smiling with a Santa hat on. So then he introduced the guests, and he keeps calling Marsha Mason Pamela, and she keeps trying to correct him. And, oh, yeah, she says, I'm Marsha. And he says, and I'm Sammy, right? And so it's a really old gag, but just the way that it's played with just the blithe indifference by Joe Flaherty, and just the over the top agony of Andrea Martin, it makes the gag work. But there's another, you see, with SCTV, it was all about setup and payoff. That you see Sammy Maudlin, he's chain smoking during the show, and there's a Christmas tree right next to him, and he keeps dropping ash onto the Christmas tree, and this keeps going on and on and on. And then, of course, eventually the tree catches on fire and they have to evacuate the stage. But the joke wouldn't work, if it weren't set up. Because, he's dropping ash on a Christmas tree. But you think, okay, nothing is going to happen. So, nothing has happened, so nothing is going to happen. It's rather like the blood test scene in John Carpenter's The Thing, right? Okay, we're going to heat up the copper wire, and we're going to put it in the petri dish full of blood. And Kurt Russell does it over and over and over again, and nothing happens. So you think, yeah, okay, this is a bust. And then this shrieking creature, I don't know, in the sixth attempt, this shrieking creature comes out of the petri dish, and that's what makes the gag work. So Neil Simon, played by Dave Thomas, has written, he has a new thing, which is called the Nutcracker Suite. And Sammy and William B. Williams, his sidekick, played by John Kennedy, they can't stop laughing. What's so funny? Well, you did Plaza Suite, and you did California Suite, and now you're doing the Nutcracker Suite. And there's just one of the most amazing joke setups I've ever heard. There was a bra for full figure gals that came out, I believe, in the 1970s. I could be wrong. It was called the Cross Your Heart bra. Extra support, for the full figure gals. So Neil Simon, he makes this joke, this really corny joke that's uplifting, he says, like Jane Russell's Cross Your Heart bra. And it's like, what? This joke, Bette Midler's Cross Your Heart bra, there's other people that Cross Your Heart jaw. In these about 6 different times and all these different circumstances, the same corny joke is used, but with different results each time. And we find out that this whole Nutcracker Suite thing, it's an example. It's meta. The whole thing is meta. There are layers within layers within layers. And so then we get to see the Nutcracker Suite, which is about Neil Simon and his wife, and they're taking a holiday in New York City for Christmas, and everything like that. His terrible movie, The Out of Towners. Everything is messed up. Everyone's on strike. Everyone's rude, and his wife is sobbing hysterically because you've written all these plays, but you've never written a Broadway play for me. So Neil Simon decides that he's going to do that. Over the course of, I don't know, like 12 hours, he's going to write a complete Broadway script for his wife, Marsha Mason. And so this gets woven into the Hoffman tale, the Nutcracker tale. And we have Eugene Levy doing an astonishing Judd Hirsch impersonation, from Taxi. And Joe Flaherty doing an even more astonishing Alan Alda impersonation as the Nutcracker Prince. And when I saw Joe Flaherty, and I watched this again last night, when I saw Joe Flaherty impersonating Alan Alda, I thought, this is so perfect. I want to punch him in the face, because Alan Alda, so obnoxious. And we have We have Dave Thomas doing Michael Caine, and Catherine O'Hara doing Maggie Smith, and just a drop dead Richard Dreyfuss impersonation from Rick Moranis. It's just so very funny. But so in the play within a play within a play, Neil Simon and his wife take the Nutcracker Suite to Eppie Epstein, played by John Candy impersonating James Coco, the biggest Broadway producer. And he just explodes. And one of the best bits is he starts yelling at Andrea Martin, and his mouth is like this far from her ear. And he goes, "You can't write 50 plays a year without turning out a stinker." He says, "This play stinks." And he says, "It's the plague, the plague." And he brings out an atomizer, like full of DDT or whatever, and then just disinfects the script with it. So Johnny Leroux, last time we saw him, he was presumably going to freeze to death on the streets of Edmonton, because that's where it was filmed. Very cold in Edmonton in the winter. And he just goes this fabulous monologue where he's drunk and freezing, and he's clearly improvising, singing David Bowie's Space Oddity with new lyrics and rambling on about Admiral Byrd and quoting Shakespeare. But then Santa appears, and it's really quite touching. Then we have the Dusty Town Sexy Holiday Special. Now, back in the old days, maybe this is still true if people still read magazines, that there was a woman called Rusty Warren, and she made all these smutty albums, okay, with titles such as Bounce Your Boobies and Knockers Up. Her real name was Eileen Goldman. If you go to the back pages of magazines, you'd find ads for strange things, like creatures that could be delivered to your house, or a cream for women that would make your breasts bigger. And I thought, even as a kid, this is obviously fake, because if scientists invented a cream that would make women's breasts bigger, this wouldn't be hidden in the back pages of a magazine. And ads for albums by people like Red Fox, who eventually got a primetime TV show, and Rusty Warren. And it's just so obscure. It is just so very obscure that you have this obnoxious woman played by Catherine O'Hara, who's wearing a fat suit. And of course, SCTV had all these people cast members who could sing. Not just they could sing in character. And there's not very many people. So the joke is that this Dusty Town character is just telling these horrible, corny, smutty jokes. And she has a catchphrase. "Isn't that true? Isn't that sweet?" You see, it's not really smutty and disgusting because it's so true and sweet. And so she has John Candy playing Divine, doing a Christmas number. That was, I think, the second time John Candy playing Divine had appeared on SCTV. The first one was in a parody of Peter Pan with David Steinberg, the impressively unfunny comedian, being mocked by Martin Short. Just an absolutely devastating impersonation. But it's just, again, it's really kind of a meta joke, because she keeps telling these corny jokes, old ribald, I suppose you could say. But the joke is that, that everyone is supposed to think that they're funny. And she thinks that they're so funny. Also, she thinks that, I don't know, she's making some sort of great contribution to the world with her terrible, terrible, smutty jokes. Eventually it leads to a plot to steal money from the cast of SCTV, and Bill Needle, the always furious TV commentator, shows up and thwarts the plot. Well, actually, he cuts himself in on the plot. And Bob and Doug McKenzie, who we've seen near the beginning, and they gave each other Christmas gifts. And guess what? It was a 25 pack of Rothmans. They gave each other identical gifts, and they were just thrilled to get a pack of cigarettes. Bob and Doug McKenzie, that's Dave Thomas and Rick Moranis, they essentially invented a kind of Canadian culture. It didn't exist. These were kind of dumb, beer drinking, cigarette smoking people, who said take off and hoser and such like, but they were lovable, and almost immediately Canada just embraced this. Yeah, we want to be considered dumb and lovable, which is far superior to the newer cliche about Canada, Canadians, of being, smug and far less smart than they think they are. But anyway, I said it before, I said it again. I think this is the funniest hour of television that I have ever seen, and it holds up. It is held up absolutely tremendously. You don't need to understand all of the cultural references to get SCTV. As I say many times, the first time that I saw them, I wasn't aware of the cultural references, But I've used this example. I'll use it again. I remember Frank Sinatra used to be mocked in a lot of Warner Brothers cartoons. And, chickens melting, to the ground when they saw Frankie, who was impossibly thin, right? He was like broomstick thin. So there's this one Warner Brothers commercial where they have Katharine Hepburn doing the balcony scene from Romeo and Juliet, only Romeo and Juliet are chickens. And so you have Juliet saying, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo? I love you, Romeo, really I do. Now, I didn't know who Shakespeare was. I didn't know Romeo and Juliet. I didn't know who Katharine Hepburn was. But even as like a 6-year-old, I thought, this is hilarious because you have a chicken speaking in this ridiculously affected voice. So that's all I have to say about the SCTV Christmas special. Most of SCTV, well, not all of the CBC stuff, came out on DVD, and pretty much all the NBC stuff came out on DVD. The Cinemax stuff, which is really underrated, was never released on DVD. You can find it on the internet, on YouTube, and at the usual places. Let's see. Watch Mr. Bean Christmas last night and going to finish SCTV tonight, says Oscar Toe. Looks like the Orson Welles' The Man Who Saw Tomorrow is on archive. Candy does a great divine, says Dan. Yes, he does. Santa, bring my baby back to me. Wasn't Alan Alda in the Out of Towners? No, Jack Lemmon, says Anne Run. Now, Jack Lemmon was a great talent, but he was also one of the great overactors of his generation. And him and, Sandy Dennis, overacting up a storm such that you want to jump into the screen and strangle both of them. Okay, let's see. Interestingly, speaking of categorizing, the guy who puts timestamps on these vids is not Zoo from the old days, says Quachulango. Candy was in about 10 movies every year. Did he work himself to death? Did John Goodman inherit his roles after that? John Candy was a big man. He was a big eater and he was a big drinker. And, he could handle it when he was younger. But the final movie that he made was called, I think, Wagons East. And if you've ever seen it, it's horrifying. He looks like every, minute it's on the screen, you think he's going to keel over and die. No, he just, he couldn't control his appetites. John Goodman at one time was as big as John Candy, but I gather that John Goodman has learned to control his appetites. I really miss John Candy, says Oscar Toe. Of course, my trail of disgrace says SCTV was rarely just referential in its imitations or parodies as SNL or Family Guy might be. They create something new with it. Yes. This character, Lola Heatherton, played by Catherine O'Hara, that she's this blonde idiot, right? Ooh, the sex pot who overacts in everything, and she has catchphrase like, I want to bear your children. And then we learned that she has this, in the Lola special, we find out she has this really sad story, and that from the time that she was a teenager, I don't know, like 15 years old or whatever, she's been passed around like a party favor. And then she comes on and sings this song. It's a Henry Mancini instrumental that they wrote new words for. You can find it on the internet. The song is called Fool in the Rain. And, she was supposed to sing New York, New York. No, I don't want to do that. I don't feel it. So I'm going to do the other song. What song? And you see her screaming, the song you didn't want me to do. And she sings this song, which is about her life. And it is hilarious. Her vocal inflections, absolutely hilarious. But it's also really terrifying because you realize what a horrible life she has led and is still leading. I love Here Comes Santa Claus, says Oscar Toe. Okay. Anybody here by chance know who the YouTuber known as David Carroll was? No, I don't. Leroux is so disappointed he can't take a lady with him. LOL, says Dan. Okay. Andrea Martin was in Black Christmas. I told this story on Luke when I was on Luke Ford's show that I met Andrea Martin once. I had spoken on the phone to Eugene Levy, and that was a big thrill. But so Andrea Martin was going to be a guest on the radio show that I produced, and I was so thrilled that I was going to tell her, I think you're the funniest woman who's ever lived. I think you're funnier than Lucille Ball or Carol Burnett, which I actually believe. Then there was this story about her in TV Guide. Remember TV Guide? Oh, and she said something like, everyone's always asking about SCTV, but, I'm on Broadway now, and I've been nominated or won a Tony or whatever. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to avoid her, okay? Because if I was with her, I'd just be burbling on about SCTV and how much I loved her on SCTV. So I left her alone, in the green room with her handler, right? So she gets on the show, and it was clear that my boss, Peter Weisbeck, had no idea who she was. And at the end, she says, if you like, this is live on air. She says, if you like, I'll do some promos for your show, right? And she does them as Edna Boyle. And I thought, apparently she's not totally sick of SCTV. And I simply could have told her how much I liked her. But as someone said at the time, you're talking about an actor here, and you think that actors ever get tired of people saying how much they love them? Yeah, that was a big mistake. That was a big mistake. Do you remember the John Candy Peppy long socks, says Oscar Toe? Yes, indeed, I did. John Candy, if you've ever seen him as the drummer in the punk rock band, the Queen Haters, fronted by Martin Short, who complains that he hates Thatcher and her war machine, mostly because she taxes his dope or something like that. So John Candy is wearing a bald wig, right? And he's got piercings or whatever, and he's playing the drums, which he could do in real life, with no facial expression at all, right? And I'm thinking there's a very small number of people who can make other people laugh with not saying anything. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up now. I'm going to be back on the air tomorrow, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Thank you all for tuning in today, by the way. Christmas Eve tomorrow, so I am going to be reading a Christmas song called The Burglar's Christmas by Willa Cather. And I was thinking, since it is Christmas Eve, maybe, we could just have a discussion amongst ourselves or spend a great deal of time. I don't really want to get into the misery of the world on Christmas Eve. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Thank you so much once again for tuning in. And if you'd like to make a donation to the live stream, my PayPal account is linked to kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you're in Canada, donations may be made directly via interact@kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do really wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.